ladies and gentlemen. You like my hats? Anyways, man, I'm just playing, bro. Just being funny, son. Man, I'll tell you what, though, man. I got a game for you right now. This is the first tiebreak game that Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura played with each other. It is the third total game that they played. Man, this is like one of the most exciting games I've seen in my life. Man, both players literally had the game completely on a silver platter. So it's kind of up in the air, man, you know, who actually won the game. You got to stick around to find that out, man. But I'll tell you what, I promise you, this will be a very exciting game for you. For all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Magandang umaga. Good morning. I'm Sal Tayo. Let's get something to eat. I need something to eat after I get done with this video, for sure. A little hungry. But yeah, man, if you guys are ready to go, son, let's take a look and see what we got for this game, homie. So we got the move E4. We got C5. So we have the Sicilian defense. We got knight to F3, knight to C6, bishop to B5. And then we do see the move E5. And this is, bear with me on this name. Nyezhmetdinov. I know I said that wrong. Nyezhmetdinov-Rossolimo. That is a complicated name to say. But yes, this is what this one is. So we do see the move castles. We got bishop to D6. And what this reminds me of, I played D4 myself. And so there is a variation of the Benoni. It's called the Benoni snake. For whatever reason, but it has this like bishop feature in it. This isn't the most common thing to do, to put the bishop in front of the pawn, because you kind of want to get this bishop out at some point in life, right? But, you know, it's not that horrible of a situation. We do see the move C3, and this move comes just in time because we got A5, bishop back, B5, bishop back, C4, bishop back. So you have just ever so slightly given your bishop somewhere to live, because it was going to be sad if it didn't have anywhere to go and it's just lost. I mean, you don't want to do that. So we do see knight to F6. We got D4. Pawn takes D3 en passant. We do see queen taking D3. Bishop going back to E7. And this is exactly why I said, now this is a blitz game. So, you know, the moves are going to be a little bit crazy. Well, not, it's actually a rapid game. Yeah, I think it's rapid time controls or blitz. It's 10 minutes, but they have a delay. Anyway, you know, so, but this is the exact reason why bishop to D6 doesn't make like 1000% sense, just simply because you have to move it again at some point. So, I mean, we do see the move bishop to G5, and we have the novelty of the game, which is D6, which boggles my mind because this is a Sicilian, and usually Sicilians, I mean, D6 is like almost always played, so whatever. Rook to D1, we got a knight over to H5, and that rim is actually a little bit grim on the rim. But we do see bishop taking E7, king taking E7, which does look kind of ugly, I'm not going to lie. You kind of had to do it because you were going to be dropping this pawn if you didn't. But you really kind of want to get your king into some type of safety at some point in the future. So we do see the move A4. Rook goes over to B8. We see pawn taking B5, pawn taking B5, and then knight to A3. Now, this is somewhat of a questionable move in this particular situation because, okay, you have this knight on the rim over here, right? So, I mean, it wants to redirect. Obviously, by going knight to H5, it's wanting to redirect to F4. So we don't let it do that. You want to keep it rim on the grim. So G3 is actually the move in this position. Just taking the time to, number one, create some luft. And then make sure that this knight can't come and live a happy life on F4, which it actually ends up doing. So after we see the move knight to A3, that's immediately what, you know, Hikaru does. And so now we've kind of misplaced our queen a little bit. So the queen does go over to E3. And then immediately, this is what you have to think about. Black's king is stuck in the center of the board. What you absolutely do not want on the board is queens. Because that just, you know, amplifies all the tactics that can be involved. So we do see the move queen to B6, trying to trade pieces. And, you know, this was actually a really cute move that Wesley So finds, and it is knight to D4. Simply because after knight takes and pawn takes, you cannot take back with the pawn because you would be losing, like, you know, if you do this right here, you would be losing the knight and you're completely lost. And you really can't take back with the queen because, I mean, there's a rook right there, so don't do that. So we do see rook going over to D8. Now, you know, Hikaru is actually really good at, you know, having positions that aren't super in his favor and being able to, like, create complications and play out of those situations. So, you know, giving him some credit right here, you know, he is finding these good moves to make, these good defensive moves. And he is ever so, you know, trying to get this king into some kind of safety, homie. So the bishop does go to B3, bishop to E6, another good defensive move. Knight comes down to C2. And now we do have the king going back to F8, you know, nestled nicely on this square. We do see rook to D2, rook D goes to C8. We got G3 now. It doesn't have quite the same oomph to it, but I mean, it's definitely a not bad move to make. We do see bishop taking B3, queen taking B3, knight going up to E6, rook A going over to D1, and then we do have the move B4. You know, you don't have a passed pawn, but you have a pawn that has the ability to move, so why not push it? We do see the move king to G2. You know, it never hurts to be safe. But the computer literally says everything is just triple zeros. Like, I mean, there's nothing to see here, even though it looks kind of exciting. But we haven't got to the great parts yet. We do see the move G6, H4, H5. I'll kind of explain, you know, the thinking probably of Wesley So in a minute because it does become relevant. We got pawn takes E5, pawn takes E5, rook goes up to D7 because why not? Put a rook on the 7th. And, I mean, if this knight feels like it wants to move and be free, we got checkmate on F7 for you. So we do see rook to C7, queen goes over to F3. Now, I was telling you guys about these pawn moves. This H4 move perfectly prevents this knight from coming here. In this particular situation. So the queen coming over here, if this pawn is not here preventing this move, the knight can just kick the queen away. So we don't want that. Also, it does on this square protect this F7 point, so it was going to inconvenience white a little bit. So that's why that move was probably played. Rook takes D7, rook takes D7, and we do have a mate threat on the board. So you kind of have to do something. A knight to D8 is the only thing you could do. We do see knight up to E3. Now, you see that Wesley So has been very careful not to trade queens in this situation. If you trade queens here, like all of your attack basically just goes away. And it's like pretty super even game. So we do see queen to C6. We got rook down to D5. Queen goes over to E6. We see queen down to D1. Now we've just taken completely over this file. Queen goes to F6. And it's getting kind of dicey. I mean, you can see the white bar is kind of up there. It's like, hey, man, you know, it's looking pretty good for Wesley So. The rook goes up to D7. We see king down to G7. The rook down to D6. Queen goes to E7. Now, the thing that you think about in this position is you do want to improve this knight because you have this queen and this rook doing a really good job. But this knight really wants to kind of find somewhere to go. But the problem is you can't go knight to D5 now because it just drops the rook. And I mean, this isn't super duper desirable. But maybe we can kind of improve on it if we go queen to D5, which is not what we see in the game, but is absolutely preferred. After queen goes to D5, the rook can slide up here, and then you can be doing some attacking right here. At least kind of get you a little pawn rolling or something. So the rook does go to D7, queen goes back down to D6, and we do see the move knight to D5. Now, this is still a really, really great position for Wesley So. We do see queen to E6. We got knight up to C7. And you have to be very, very careful where you put this queen, because if you put it in the wrong place, like here, then you're looking at a check and a fork. See? You see? The queen's gone. So don't do that. So we do see the move queen to C6. Queen goes to D5. Now we are trading, but we're in like a little bit of a better situation, and we're getting a passed pawn in this situation. So queen takes, pawn takes. We got knight going over to B7. Knight goes to E6 with check. The king goes up to G8. We see knight down to G5. Now you see the white knight is taking advantage of this, you know, square here. The knight goes back to D8. We see king up to F3 because you want to get the king into the game. The queens are off the board, so it is pretty, you know, comfortable for the king to come in the center of the board, unless you're this one, because there really isn't a whole lot of places you can go. Because I mean, you got this rook and this knight kind of in your kitchen. We do see the move B3. We got king up to E4, and knight goes to B7, and you really didn't have a way to protect this pawn, so we just snap a pawn off the board. Now you see that, you know, white is a pawn to the good. The knight goes down to C5, and this doesn't bother white whatsoever. Wesley So has a complete win in this position if he could find one move. So if you want to pause the video and find what one move that is, go ahead and do so. All right, the move that I'm looking for. So the move that we actually saw in the game was rook to C7. Now, the one thing I will say about the situation is both players have less than 10 seconds on their clock. So they're both playing just like blitzing out moves, bulleting moves. If Wesley So found rook takes F7, then you would be understanding that black is in a complete box and they really don't have much that they can do. Really, I mean, what the computer wants you to do in this situation is check and try to like queen your own pawn. Knight goes to D3 with check, but the king wants to move up anyway. King to E6. If You go for the pawn, knight takes b2, which these are all like suggested moves for black to play. You do have d6. Not only is d6, you know, trying to force this pawn into promotion, it's also blocking the check on b6 so that you can safely step over to the f6 square. And you see that black is in a complete box right here. You do see the move knight to c4. You got knight down to e4. And we see rook to e8 checking the game. If you get really, really careless here and you think, oh, I'm going to go ahead and queen this pawn real quick, well, you would be looking at checkmate after this and this and this. So that is why we see Hikaru not going into this variation, not trying to lose the game. So after we see rook to e8 with check, we would see rook to e7, knight, king going over to f8, knight going to f6, knight taking d6, and this is like literally, like I said, the way the computer says that you have to play. You see that this knight is getting thrown away, but you have to be careful the way you take back. Knight taking e8, rook, knight taking e8, and then rook going over to b7, and this is so insanely won because you have a rook against the knight. You have to just make sure you don't get forked, and you are going to be corralling this pawn up very, very shortly. So that is what we could have seen if Wesley So had found the win, but he didn't. He did go rook to c7, like I said. And we have an almost identical position that comes up as a result, but it is very significantly different because of literally one saving move that we'll get to in a minute. After the king comes up to f6, so you see that basically all the ideas are the same, but I mean, it's like I said, that one move. Knight takes b2, so everything is happening the same. Knight takes f7. Knight goes to c4. We got knight going to h6 with check. But the thing that we crazily see is Hikaru being able to shimmy all the way across the board and place a crucial check. So after we see these checks, he's able to get himself to c8. And then after d6, rook goes to b6, and this is the key move that I was talking about. Now you cannot push this pawn forward. So it's like, I think that Hikaru was just playing on like intuition. He wasn't like calculating any of this. He was just basically saying, okay, I can escape to c8. I can put this rook down here and block this pawn. And I mean, this is actually slightly better for white, but I mean, you see how unclear the situation is. Rook goes to e8. The king goes down to b7. We see king going up to e7. So, I mean, if you're anybody looking at this, you're thinking, man, this has to be something because look at white. White is like right there. Like, you know, they're about to queen their pawn up here. The king is right here. But it doesn't happen that way. We got b2, d7, b1 equals queen, d8 equals queen. So now we have 3 pieces on the board for each side. It's crazy. The queen comes up to b4 with check. You had to find this move. Knight goes to d6 with check, which looks kind of weird because you're like, bro, why am I placing that check? Because the knight, that's not a safe square. Well, we do see queen taking d6 with check, queen taking d6, knight taking d6. You have to go into this situation if you are white. Now, even though it does look pretty dire if you're white, this is actually somewhat of a holdable position if you play correctly and you don't make any like serious blunders. The rook goes over to g8. Knight goes to f5 with check. And you have to make sure, like I said, do not get forked. That is something really, really hard to do when you have 12 seconds on the clock. Like 10 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever. So the king goes up to e8, a very safe square. The king goes over to c7. We see rook over to f8. Knight goes to h6. We see rook down to f4. Rook to e6 with check. King goes to f8. So you see that this game is literally about like having this much of breathing room for both kings. The king goes down to d6. We got king to g7. We got knight down to f5 with check. King goes over to f7. The king goes down to d5. We see rook down to f3. We got rook over to a6. Rook goes to b3. We see king down to e4. Rook goes over to c3. We see knight going to d6. King going to g7. Now, coming up, what white has to do to try to hold this endgame is get rid of all of black's pawns. If they can get rid of all of black's pawns, they have a good chance of holding a rook against a rook and a knight type of an endgame. The king goes over to d4. We see rook over to b3. We got knight down to f5 with check. The king goes over to h7. The king goes to e5. The rook goes back up to b8. We kind of want to shield ourselves from the check stuff. The knight comes up to e7. We see king over to g7, rook to a7. Why not create some nasties? Because, hey, if you do nothing, This is check, and I'm picking up the rook, and I'm gonna, you know, shake your hand, give you a high five, and go home. The rook goes down to b5 with check. The king goes up to e6. The rook goes to b6 with check. King goes to f5. Rook goes to b5. King goes to g4. Rook goes to b4 with check, and then king goes down to h3. And Hikaru was hiding on this square. And it's cool. I mean, the position is really great. We got king down to h6. Rook goes to a6. King to g5. Knight to d5. Or rook goes to d4. We got knight to c3. We got king back to h6. King goes to g2. And Wesley So's plan is being set in motion here. He is wanting to try to get rid of these pawns. This is his only chance. We got the move g4. We got knight down to e2, rook over to b4, king to f3, pawn takes, king takes. And Wesley So has successfully gotten rid of all of Hikaru's pawns. He had to give one of his pawns up in the process. Knight to f4, king to g5, rook to a5, king up to h6, king to g4, king to g7, king to f5, rook to b7, knight to e6 with check, king back down to h6, king to f6. And this knight is going to be winning one of these pawns coming up pretty soon. But he has a lot better chance of drawing this position. It is pretty even. It's a little bit slight to black just because they have the extra piece. We do see the move h5. Rook goes to a8. We got f4. Rook goes to h8 with check. King. Rook goes over to h7. And you really don't want to trade if you're black because all of your win chances go completely out the window. So you have to avoid that trade. Rook goes over to a8. We got rook to b7. Knight goes down and takes f4. So there's the pawn getting taken. Rook goes to b6 with check. King goes to e6. Or knight goes to e6. King goes to h7. Because we're trying to kind of promote this pawn at some point, right? The rook goes to a7 with check. King goes down to h6. We got rook to d7. We got rook taking e6. Yeah. This is lost now. So we start the game, and Wesley So is like completely dominating the position, and then it kind of goes down, and it goes back up to where it's like completely won. And then we get in this position where Hikaru is winning, is doing really good. He's starting to kind of win a little bit, right? Now we have a situation where he is going to get in a lost end game. This is not, because it's a rook pawn, this is not some type of a build the bridge, you know, Lucina type of position that you can get into because those pesky rook pawns. So giving up the rook here completely loses the game, and it does it in exact fashion from what Hikaru plays right here. King goes to g6, trying to get out of the edge of the board. The rook goes down to d1, especially going as far as possible to give yourself checking distance. The pawn goes to h6, rook goes to g1, the king steps in front of the pawn, which is you don't want on the edge of the board. King goes to h7, king goes to f6, and it is in this position that Wesley So resigns the game. Now, for any of you who aren't sure why this is completely lost, is because basically what black is going to do is going to waste a move to get himself in a position where he's just going to checkmate white. Now, the problem with the position that white has is they only have this one square to go to now. So all... You know, and I mean, especially this king right here is cutting off like all of the squares. So they literally have to just shuffle back and forth. So all black is going to do, like I said, is just waste a move literally to anywhere on this back rank. You know, or even, I mean, really anywhere, literally. So if you just pick a move, after the king goes to h8, you can go to rook to e1. Or literally do anything, like I said. And just waste a couple of moves. After the king goes back down to h7, its only move. The rook slides over to h1. Now, this can be done literally anyway. You can slide the rook anywhere you want to along this back rank. And you can really do whatever you want as far as moving the rook up here. And the king can just shimmy back and forth. So if you did something like this, the king would come back down. And you do rook to h5. The king would go up and you'd have checkmate. So... Like I said, if the king went up like this, I mean, you know, do this right here. Bam, the king comes back down. You go. All you do at the last point before the king moves up is just put this rook behind the pawn somewhere. And then it's just going to be completely mating. And then so after this, you would be having checkmate the other way. Like I said, it works with any of these squares. And so that is all she wrote. So in this position here, Wesley So did resign the game. So like I said, man, it was a crazy game. Insane. I'm going to go ahead and get off so my video is not 20 minutes. But this was a 103 move game, so it's crazy. But I appreciate you guys very much, and I'll see you next time.